Today, we stand at a crossroads, a pivotal moment in the ongoing narrative of justice, accountability, and the power of the people. A moment that has sent shockwaves across the globe, a reminder that the struggle for human rights is far from over. In the face of rising tensions, the voices of ordinary citizens have become louder, more determined, and more unified. Our nation, like many others, has faced times when it seemed like the institutions meant to protect us were complicit in perpetuating injustice. But today, something extraordinary has happened. The world has witnessed the courage of individuals standing up against forces that would rather silence them. And as we witness these events unfold, there is no turning back. Kenya's law enforcement, like many others across the world, is not immune to scrutiny. For far too long, there have been cries of oppression, of abuse, of systems that fail the very people they are meant to serve. But today, we hear something different. We hear a message of accountability, a message that echoes through the streets, the villages, and the hearts of every citizen. Enough is enough. This is not a call for chaos, but for change. This is not an attack on the dedicated officers who work every day to keep us safe, but rather a call for reform, for a renewed sense of duty, for a return to the core values of justice, respect, and fairness. Today, we have witnessed the courage to speak truth to power, to hold those in positions of authority accountable for their actions. We have seen a united front of citizens, human rights activists, and law enforcement officials who have decided that enough is enough. This is not just an isolated event, it is part of a global movement. A movement where people from all walks of life stand together, demanding that the institutions meant to protect them serve them with dignity. What we are witnessing today is not the end, but the beginning of a new era. An era where the voice of the people cannot be ignored, where justice will not be delayed, and where every individual, no matter their status, will be held accountable for their actions. This is the moment when we decide that we are not passive observers in the face of injustice. We are active participants in shaping our future. Today, we stand together, shoulder to shoulder, knowing that the world is watching and that the world will never be the same again. Let this be a turning point. Let this moment serve as a reminder that we, the people, have the power to create the change we wish to see in the world. Today, we find ourselves standing at a critical juncture in our collective journey toward a fair and just society. What has unfolded before our eyes is a testament to the power of accountability, a reminder that institutions, especially those in positions of power, must be held to the highest standards of justice, transparency, and respect for human rights. The importance of accountability cannot be overstated, particularly when it comes to law enforcement, the very institution that is meant to protect and serve all citizens, regardless of their background, race, or status. For too long, we have seen instances where the very people entrusted with the responsibility of upholding the law have abused their power. We have seen cases where force was used disproportionately, where rights were violated, and where individuals were subjected to unfair treatment because of systemic flaws. It is not enough to simply call for change. We must demand accountability from those who are supposed to be our protectors. When law enforcement officers, or any authority figures for that matter, act outside the bounds of the law, they not only break the trust of the citizens they serve, but also undermine the very foundation of our justice system. This is a wake-up call. Citizens, empowered by their voices, have begun to demand more. They are no longer passive recipients of decisions made in the halls of power. Instead, they are active participants in the process, holding those in authority to account. This is not an abstract idea. It is a concrete reality that is being demonstrated across the globe. Whether it is through protests, advocacy, or simply speaking out, people are saying that enough is enough. They are insisting that their rights be respected and that justice be served fairly, irrespective of one's position or influence. Law enforcement is tasked with a tremendous responsibility. Officers are the individuals we rely on to protect our communities, to uphold the law, and to ensure our safety. Their role in society is of immense importance, and when they fulfill that role correctly, they foster trust, security, and peace. However, when their actions stray from the principles of justice and fairness, when they use their power unjustly, the consequences can be devastating. These actions not only harm the individuals directly involved, but also ripple throughout society, eroding trust in the very systems that are supposed to protect us. It is essential to understand that accountability does not mean punishing every officer or casting aspersions on the entire law enforcement system. Accountability is about ensuring that all actions are scrutinized and that those who violate the rights of others are held responsible for their actions. It is about ensuring that there is a system in place where complaints and grievances are heard, investigated, and addressed in a transparent and fair manner. When an officer breaks the law, they must be held accountable, just as any citizen would be. Without accountability, the foundations of law and order begin to crumble, and with it, the trust of the people in the institutions designed to protect them. The citizens of this world have made it clear that they will no longer accept blind obedience to systems that fail to protect them, that turn a blind eye to injustice, or that perpetuate inequality. This is a global awakening. People everywhere are demanding a system that values fairness over favoritism, justice over power, and respect over control. In many places, citizens are now empowered to speak out, to push for reforms, and to insist that their governments, including law enforcement, work for the people and not against them. This shift in the collective consciousness is long overdue, but it is a step in the right direction. We must recognize that true justice can only exist in an environment where accountability is prioritized. Without accountability, we risk descending into a state of unchecked power where those with authority are allowed to act without fear of repercussions. This is not a world that any of us want to live in. We want to live in a world where power is exercised responsibly, where those who are entrusted with the safety and well-being of others act with integrity and uphold the highest standards of ethical conduct. The growing demand for accountability is not a call for anarchy or disorder, but rather a plea for a more just and equitable system. It is a plea for reforms that ensure law enforcement agencies operate transparently, that complaints are taken seriously, and that officers who violate the law face appropriate consequences. This is a call for a system that works for everyone, that listens to the voices of the people, and that recognizes the inherent dignity and worth of every individual, regardless of their background or station in life. As citizens, we have a right to demand that those who are in positions of power and authority be held accountable for their actions. We must continue to advocate for a justice system that works for everyone, where no one is above the law, and where accountability is not just a slogan, but a guiding principle. The power of accountability lies in its ability to ensure that justice is not only done, but seen to be done. It ensures that when the law is broken, there is a fair process in place to address it. And most importantly, it guarantees that the rights and dignity of every citizen are respected and upheld. In the end, it is through accountability that we build trust in our institutions. It is through accountability that we restore faith in the systems that are meant to protect us. And it is through accountability that we can move forward, united in the belief that justice, fairness, and respect should be the cornerstones of every society. The courage of individuals who rise against systemic injustice is a powerful testament to the strength of the human spirit and the collective power of the people. When individuals take a stand, they do not stand alone. They represent the hopes, fears, and dreams of countless others who have suffered in silence for far too long. In this moment, we see something greater than a mere act of defiance. We see the spark of a collective awakening that has been years, perhaps even centuries, in the making. The courage of these individuals ignites something within the hearts of many, an unshakable belief that change is possible and that no one is above the law, no matter their status, position, or wealth. Historically, it has often been the marginalized, the oppressed, and the voiceless who have carried the weight of injustice on their shoulders. Yet, with every act of courage, with every voice raised in protest or in defense of justice, a ripple effect is created. Each individual voice, no matter how small, contributes to a much larger chorus. Together, they form a powerful movement that cannot be silenced. This is the essence of what it means when the people speak. They cannot be ignored, and their demands cannot be overlooked. In this way, individual acts of courage become the catalyst for broader social change as they challenge the status quo and demand that the world listen to those who have long been silenced. There is something profoundly transformative about a collective voice. When the people unite and speak with a common purpose, their message carries weight that cannot be easily dismissed. This is the moment when silence gives way to action, when apathy transforms into activism, and when the passive acceptance of injustice is replaced by a bold declaration of the right to dignity and fairness. The collective voice is not just a cry for help, but a demand for justice, for accountability, and for a world that no longer tolerates oppression in any form. When the people speak, they do not just call for reform, they call for revolution in how we think, how we act, and how we treat one another as equals. What makes this moment so significant is that it is not just a singular event or isolated incident, it is a symbol of a broader movement that is echoing across the globe. In every corner of the world, from urban centers to rural villages, people are rising up to demand their rights, to demand fairness, and to stand in defiance of systems that perpetuate inequality. In this moment, we see that the struggle for justice is not confined to one place, one people, or one issue. It is a universal fight for the dignity of all, and it is a fight that is powered by the courage of individuals who refuse to remain silent in the face of wrongdoing. This moment in history marks a profound shift in the balance of power. For too long, those in positions of authority, whether political leaders, law enforcement, or powerful corporations, have been able to act with impunity, knowing that the voices of the oppressed were often ignored or dismissed. But today, that dynamic is changing. The people have spoken, and their voices are being heard. This is not a fleeting moment. It is a call for systemic change, for the dismantling of systems that have allowed oppression to flourish unchecked. When the people speak, they are not just advocating for their own rights, but for the rights of all who have been excluded, marginalized, or denied justice. Their voices represent the silenced and the forgotten, and they are demanding that the world no longer look away. The power of the people lies in their ability to shape the course of history. When individuals come together, driven by a shared vision of a better, more just world, they can move mountains. The collective voice of the people is a force that can topple unjust systems and force governments, corporations, and institutions to reckon with their actions. It is a reminder that true power does not lie in the hands of a few, but in the collective will of the people. When the people speak, they speak not just for themselves, but for the future generations who will inherit the world they create. Their courage becomes the blueprint for a society that values justice, equality, and the inherent dignity of all people. In this moment of collective awakening, the courage of individuals is contagious. It inspires others to join in, to raise their voices, and to take action. It is the courage of one person standing up against injustice that emboldens others to do the same. This is how movements are born, through the courage of individuals who dare to stand in the face of adversity and speak out against what they know to be wrong. And as more people join the cause, the momentum grows, creating a tidal wave of change that is unstoppable. It is the power of the people, united in their demand for justice, that has the potential to reshape societies and transform the world. The collective voice also highlights a fundamental truth, that when oppression is ignored, it festers, but when it is confronted, it loses its power. The courage of individuals to speak out and demand change does more than challenge the systems of power. It demands accountability. The people are no longer willing to accept the status quo. They are no longer willing to accept the oppression of the vulnerable or the silencing of their voices. When the people speak, they are asserting their right to live in a world that is fair, just, and respectful of the dignity of every individual. It is a powerful reminder that the voice of the people is not only a force for change, but the bedrock upon which true justice can be built. This moment signifies more than just a call to action. It signifies a promise, one that the people will no longer accept oppression, no longer tolerate injustice, and will always fight for a world where every voice is heard and every person is treated with respect. The courage of individuals standing up against systemic injustice is a force that will not be ignored, and it will continue to echo through history as a defining moment of collective awakening and transformation. The call for change is often misunderstood. Too frequently, the demand for reform is misinterpreted as a direct attack on the very institutions that are meant to uphold the law and maintain order. Yet, the reality is that the demand is not for rebellion, nor for the dismantling of the systems we rely on for safety and security. It is instead a passionate plea for reform, an earnest request to realign our systems of justice with the values they were initially meant to protect. The call is for a law enforcement system that serves every citizen fairly, equitably, and with an unwavering respect for human rights, regardless of race, class, or background. To understand this plea, we must first acknowledge the essential role that law enforcement plays in our society. Police officers, judges, and other law enforcement agents are tasked with the crucial responsibility of ensuring the safety and well-being of the public. They are entrusted with power, often in moments of intense vulnerability, to protect citizens, uphold the law, and maintain peace. Without a well-functioning law enforcement system, chaos would likely ensue, and society would struggle to function. However, the effectiveness of law enforcement is not solely measured by its ability to enforce the law. Rather, its true measure lies in the trust and confidence that the community places in it. It is the very nature of law enforcement to wield significant power, and with such power comes great responsibility. And therein lies the crux of the issue. When that power is misused or exercised in a way that undermines the trust of the people, it erodes the very foundation upon which justice stands. What many are demanding today is not an end to the police force or a rejection of authority, but a fundamental overhaul of a system that for too long has failed to deliver on its promises of fairness and justice. Across the world, we have seen countless instances of law enforcement overstepping its bounds, whether through racial profiling, excessive use of force, or systemic discrimination. These actions have not only harmed individuals, but have also undermined the legitimacy of the institutions meant to protect us. The call for reform is an acknowledgement that the system in its current form has fallen short. It is a recognition that there is room for improvement, and more importantly, that the status quo is no longer acceptable. This call for reform is not a rejection of the police or law enforcement officers themselves. In fact, it is an acknowledgement of the hard work, dedication, and bravery that many officers show in their daily duties. Most officers enter their profession with the sincere intent to protect their communities and ensure justice is served. However, the system within which they operate needs to be restructured to allow for greater accountability, transparency, and fairness. A reform agenda seeks to make the system work better, not to tear it down. Reform does not mean disregarding law enforcement's role in society. Instead, it means reinforcing the values that should define it: fairness, equity, and respect for all individuals. It is a call to correct the systems that have allowed inequality and injustice to persist. These reforms could include improving training to ensure officers understand and respect human rights, enhancing accountability mechanisms to investigate and address misconduct, and ensuring that laws are applied equitably, regardless of a person's race, economic status, or social standing. It is about creating a law enforcement culture that values community relationships, prioritizes de-escalation, and aims for restorative justice rather than punitive measures. Equally important, reform calls for a reimagining of what safety means in our communities. Safety is not solely achieved through the threat of force or the presence of law enforcement officers on every corner. True safety emerges from building strong, trusting relationships between law enforcement and the communities they serve. It is achieved when people feel that the system is there to protect them, not to oppress or intimidate them. This transformation requires creating an environment where community members, particularly those from marginalized groups, feel heard, valued, and respected. It requires rethinking policing strategies that disproportionately affect minority communities and prioritizing nonviolent approaches to conflict resolution. To make this a reality, reform must involve a combination of policy change, cultural shifts, and a commitment to addressing the root causes of inequality within law enforcement institutions. It means revisiting policies such as use of force protocols, instituting stronger oversight boards to monitor and review police conduct, and incorporating community input in law enforcement practices. It also means reforming how police officers are trained, ensuring that their education goes beyond technical skills to include cultural competence, empathy, and conflict resolution techniques. There are those who fear that calls for reform could undermine the integrity of law enforcement. They worry that by questioning the system or pushing for change, we might somehow weaken the ability of police officers to do their jobs effectively. However, these concerns miss the point. Reform is not about rendering law enforcement ineffective. It is about making it more just, more transparent, and more accountable. By creating a system that operates with integrity, we build greater trust with the community, which in turn leads to better outcomes for both law enforcement officers and the public. It is important to recognize that reform is not an event, but a process. Change, especially in systems as deeply ingrained as law enforcement, will not happen overnight. It requires sustained effort, public dialogue, and above all, the courage to face uncomfortable truths. It requires a commitment to dismantling systems of oppression and addressing the root causes of inequality. It calls for the humility to admit that the system is not perfect and that there is always room for growth and improvement. The call for reform is also a reminder that the fight for justice is ongoing. It is a recognition that the struggle for equality and fairness is never truly finished, but is rather a continuous pursuit. The demand for reform should not be seen as an adversarial challenge to law enforcement, but as a reminder that we all share the responsibility of creating a better, fairer world. It is a collective plea to build systems that work for everyone, where the principles of justice and equality are not just ideals, but lived realities. Ultimately, the call for reform is not about rejecting law enforcement. It is about asking for a law enforcement system that reflects the best of our shared values: fairness, equity, and respect for human dignity. It is a call for a system that works for all, regardless of their background or circumstances, and one that ensures justice is not just a privilege for the few, but a right for all. What we are witnessing today is not merely an isolated event or a momentary outrage. It is a powerful and necessary chapter in a much broader global movement. This movement is characterized by a growing demand for accountability, transparency, and justice, one that is reverberating across continents and cultures. It is a worldwide call to action, one that seeks to address the deep-rooted inequities, abuses, and corruption that have long existed in systems of governance, law enforcement, and corporate power. At its heart, this movement is about reclaiming the fundamental rights of every individual, regardless of race, gender, nationality, or socioeconomic status, and ensuring that justice is not just an ideal, but a reality. Across the globe, we have seen a surge in protests, social movements, and grassroots activism, all united by a shared vision of justice. In every corner of the world, from North America to Europe, from Africa to Asia, people are standing up to demand their rights and to challenge systems that have historically marginalized or oppressed them. These movements are not confined to any single issue or region, but are deeply interconnected by their focus on fundamental human rights, equality, and dignity. Whether it is protesting police brutality, fighting against racial discrimination, demanding economic justice, or advocating for climate action, the global movement for justice is a testament to the power of collective action and the growing awareness that the fight for human rights is not bound by borders. At the heart of this movement is the demand for accountability. Across the world, citizens are increasingly unwilling to accept the status quo, the idea that powerful institutions can operate with impunity, disregarding the well-being of the people they are meant to serve. Whether it is law enforcement agencies using excessive force, political leaders engaging in corruption, or corporations exploiting vulnerable populations, the message is clear. Those in positions of power must be held accountable for their actions. This global demand for accountability is reshaping the way we think about justice, governance, and human rights. It is no longer enough for institutions to claim that they are acting in the public's best interest. They must demonstrate it through transparent, accountable actions that protect the rights and dignity of all people. The movement for justice is also inseparable from the demand for transparency. Transparency has become a key principle for movements around the world, as people are no longer willing to tolerate secrecy, corruption, and abuse of power. Social media, the rise of citizen journalism, and the increasing use of technology to expose wrongdoing have made it more difficult for institutions to hide their actions. With greater access to information, people are able to see the injustices that have been swept under the rug for far too long, and they are demanding that these injustices be addressed. The global movement for justice is, in many ways, a fight for greater openness and visibility in the systems that govern us. Transparency allows people to see the inner workings of institutions, to hold them accountable, and to demand the reforms necessary to ensure that these institutions serve the public rather than protect their own interests. But this movement is not only about exposing the failures of institutions, it is also about creating new systems that are just, equitable, and inclusive. Across the globe, people are not just calling for accountability, they are calling for structural change. They are calling for policies, laws, and systems that prioritize the well-being of individuals and communities over the interests of the powerful. This includes pushing for reform in areas such as law enforcement, the judicial system, healthcare, education, and economic policy. People are demanding a world in which justice is not a privilege for the few, but a right for all. The global movement for justice is a fight for the kind of world where every person has the opportunity to live with dignity, safety, and opportunity. What is particularly striking about this global movement is how interconnected it is. While it might appear that each issue is isolated to a specific region or country, the underlying causes are often the same: a failure of governance, a disregard for human rights, and systems that perpetuate inequality. Whether it is the fight for racial justice in the United States, the demand for gender equality in India, or the call for freedom of expression in China, these struggles are all part of the same larger narrative. They are part of a growing awareness that justice and human rights are universal demands, not bound by borders, culture, or geography. As individuals and groups across the world organize and take action, they are finding solidarity with others who share their commitment to justice. This solidarity across borders and cultures has created a global network of advocates who are working together to challenge systems of oppression and build a more just world for all. This worldwide movement is also driven by the recognition that the fight for justice is not just about changing laws or policies, it is about changing hearts and minds. It is about challenging the deeply ingrained prejudices, biases, and systemic inequalities that have existed for centuries. It is about dismantling the structures that perpetuate inequality and creating a culture of respect, inclusion, and equality. The global movement for justice is as much about shifting societal norms as it is about enacting legal or political change. It is about changing how we view one another, how we treat one another, and how we collectively define justice in the modern world. In this context, the global movement for justice is also a movement for hope. It is a movement that believes change is possible and that the collective action of individuals and communities can create lasting, positive transformation. Every protest, every rally, every act of resistance is a reminder that the fight for justice is not a fight that can be won by any one person or group alone. It is a fight that requires the participation of all, people from every walk of life, from every corner of the world, working together to build a better future for all. In the end, the global movement for justice is a powerful reminder that we are not isolated in our struggles. We are part of a larger, interconnected world where the fight for one person's rights is the fight for everyone's rights. This is not a fight that can be won in isolation. It is a fight that requires unity, solidarity, and collective action on a global scale. The demand for justice is a demand for the protection of the most fundamental rights that belong to all human beings. And as we stand together, we create the possibility for a future that is fair, just, and inclusive for all. This moment is not just another fleeting chapter in the ongoing story of humanity. It marks the beginning of a profound turning point in history. It is a moment that will be looked back on as a defining moment, the point at which the world shifted towards something greater, something more just. The world has seen injustice for far too long, and while there were always voices that spoke out against it, today those voices have multiplied, and they are stronger and more unified than ever before. What we are witnessing now is not just an isolated incident or a temporary surge of anger. It is the birth of a new era. The weight of collective action, the power of unified voices, and the unstoppable force of people demanding change will reverberate across generations. For centuries, societies have grappled with inequality, exploitation, and injustice in all forms: racial, economic, gender-based, and environmental. Yet, despite the persistence of these injustices, people have continued to fight for a better world. We have seen individual movements rise, but they were often crushed or diminished by the overwhelming forces of those in power. Now, however, the scale is different. This moment, this collective awakening, signifies that we will not stand idly by any longer as injustice unfolds around us. This is not just about one specific cause, one particular incident, or a singular moment of outrage. It is about a broad collective realization that the time for complacency is over. We cannot afford to look away or pretend that things will improve on their own. People from all walks of life, across the globe, are standing together, not just in opposition to what is wrong, but in active pursuit of what is right. What makes this moment particularly significant is the realization that change is not just a possibility, it is inevitable. When enough people come together with a common cause, when they unite with a singular purpose and a shared vision of a better future, change is not something that is merely hoped for, it is something that will happen. History teaches us that every significant societal transformation, whether it was the abolition of slavery, the civil rights movement, the fight for women's suffrage, or the end of apartheid, was driven by ordinary people who chose to stand up and demand change. These movements were initially met with resistance, with skepticism, and with a desire from the powerful to maintain the status quo. But in the end, they succeeded, not because they were easier, but because they were built on an unwavering belief in justice and equality. Now, as we stand at this turning point, we see that the same principle applies. This is a movement not driven by force or aggression, but by the undeniable strength of a united will. When people come together, when they collectively say, enough, the institutions and systems that perpetuate injustice have no choice but to respond. The shift we are witnessing now is not just a momentary outcry, but a sustained and growing movement that will continue to gain momentum. What we are experiencing is the unfolding of a new social contract, one that is built on fairness, transparency, and respect for the rights of every individual. It is a moment in which the foundations of outdated systems are being questioned. It is a wake-up call to those in positions of power who have for too long taken advantage of their authority, exploited the vulnerable, and perpetuated inequalities. But it is also a reminder that power lies in the hands of the people, and when they unite, nothing is impossible. The world has seen that the power of the collective is a force that cannot be ignored, and the momentum that is building right now is just the beginning of something far greater. And the momentum that is building right now is just the beginning of something far greater. At the heart of this turning point is the understanding that the fight for justice is not an abstract or lofty ideal. It is not something that is reserved for a select few or relegated to distant histories of oppression. The fight for justice is happening right now, in real time, with real people demanding that their rights be respected, that their voices be heard, and that systems of oppression be dismantled. What was once seen as an unshakable status quo is now being challenged, and the power of that challenge is being felt globally. This moment marks the beginning of a shift in how justice is conceived, pursued, and achieved. This turning point is not just about the movements that are currently visible, but also about the ripple effect they will have on future generations. The children and grandchildren of today will inherit a world that has been fundamentally altered by the collective action we are witnessing now. They will inherit a world in which justice is not an abstract idea, but a reality that is fought for, protected, and valued. They will be able to look back at this moment in history and recognize that it was the beginning of the end for oppressive systems and the start of a new era of equality and fairness. In many ways, this is a defining moment for humanity. It is a reminder that no matter how entrenched systems of power and oppression may seem, they are never invincible. Change, even when it seems impossible, is always within reach if we dare to challenge the status quo. We are seeing this play out now, as people everywhere are demanding change, speaking truth to power, and standing together in solidarity. The world is at a crossroads, and it is clear that we are on the verge of a new chapter, one that promises a more just and equitable future for all. This is a moment that calls us to action, to stand united in the pursuit of a world where everyone's rights are respected, where injustice is no longer tolerated, and where equality is not a privilege, but a fundamental right. It reminds us that history is not just something that happens to us, but something we shape with our actions, our voices, and our collective will. As we stand at this turning point, let us remember that the future is not something that simply unfolds, it is something we create together. And when people unite for a common cause, no injustice is too powerful to overcome, and no system is too entrenched to be dismantled. The change that we are witnessing now is not just possible, it is inevitable, and it is the start of a new era that will define the future of humanity. We are living in a time of profound transformation where the collective consciousness is awakening, and the idea of passive bystanders in the face of wrongdoing is becoming increasingly obsolete. No longer can we afford to sit back and watch injustice unfold around us. The need for active participation in shaping the future has never been more urgent. This is a moment in history where every individual has a vital role to play in creating a world where justice is not just a concept, but a lived reality for all. We can no longer stand idly by, hoping that someone else will take responsibility. The responsibility to build a more just society falls on all of us, and it starts with recognizing the power each person holds to influence change. Historically, society has often relied on a few brave individuals or groups to spearhead movements for justice. While these efforts have been monumental in reshaping laws and policies, the time has come for everyone to recognize that they are not merely spectators in this global story. We are active participants in it. From the choices we make every day to the way we engage with our communities and the ways we hold institutions accountable, we all contribute to the collective social fabric. Our voices, our actions, and our decisions carry weight, whether we are advocating for better policies, supporting marginalized communities, or calling out injustice when we see it. The path to creating a more just society begins with individual awareness and accountability. Each of us must ask ourselves how we are complicit, either directly or indirectly, in perpetuating systems of inequality and injustice. It may not always be easy to confront uncomfortable truths about our own biases, privileges, or the ways we've allowed inequality to persist. But it is through self-reflection and active acknowledgement of these realities that we can begin to change. Our participation begins with understanding the role we play in society, recognizing the power structures at work, and using that understanding to fuel our actions. It's about learning and unlearning, acknowledging where we fall short, and pushing ourselves to do better. This shift from passive acceptance to active participation is the cornerstone of social change. The old narrative that one person can't make a difference is quickly being replaced with the understanding that collective action is built from the ground up, and each individual's effort contributes to the larger movement. When people stand together, even in small acts of resistance or support, the momentum of change grows exponentially. Whether it's showing up to a protest, donating time or resources to a cause, speaking out against discrimination, or simply educating others about issues of injustice, every act of participation matters. The power of unity cannot be overstated. When individuals come together, they amplify each other's efforts. What may seem like a solitary action becomes part of a greater collective force, and the ripples of that collective action can reach far beyond what any single person could achieve alone. We've seen time and time again that when people come together in solidarity, their collective power becomes impossible to ignore. The social movements of the past, whether in the fight for civil rights, women's rights, or labor rights, were not won by a single leader or group, but by the collaboration of many. The same principle holds true today. Change happens when people join forces, when they link arms and push for a future where justice is accessible to all. In the age of technology and social media, our ability to engage in social movements has expanded even further. Platforms that once served as tools for entertainment or communication have now become powerful vehicles for activism and advocacy. Social media in particular has democratized the process of organizing and raising awareness. A single tweet, a post, or a video can spark global conversations and mobilize millions of people around the world to take action. This connectivity means that no one is ever truly alone in their desire for change. We can amplify voices that were once silenced, connect across geographic boundaries, and form global alliances to advocate for justice. Technology has given every individual the opportunity to contribute to movements in meaningful ways, whether through online petitions, crowdfunding, or spreading information. Yet, even as we embrace the power of technology, it is critical to remember that active participation also requires real-world engagement. Online activism can only take us so far. The next step is the hard, often uncomfortable work of engaging in our local communities, having face-to-face conversations, and holding local leaders and institutions accountable. Social change isn't something that just happens on the internet. It takes place on the streets, in city halls, in schools, workplaces, and homes. True progress requires rolling up our sleeves and working with others to create meaningful, tangible change in the places where we live and work. For too long, people have been told that their voices don't matter or that their actions are insignificant in the grand scheme of things. But the truth is that every voice matters. Every action matters. We are all part of this ongoing process of shaping the world we live in, and it is up to each of us to decide how we will engage with the world around us. Will we stand back and watch as injustice unfolds, or will we rise to the occasion, knowing that the future depends on our actions today? The fight for justice is not an abstract concept. It is a movement that requires the active involvement of every single person. It demands that we all take ownership of the world we are creating and work together to build a society where fairness, equality, and respect for human dignity are the norms. This moment in history is a reminder that change is possible, and it starts with us. Whether we are fighting for racial justice, gender equality, economic fairness, or environmental protection, we each have a responsibility to engage with the world and work toward a better future. We have reached a critical point where the need for active participation is more urgent than ever. The status quo has shown us its flaws, its injustices, and its inequalities. But it is also showing us our collective power. We are no longer helpless in the face of injustice. We are no longer passive bystanders. The future is being shaped right now by our hands, our voices, and our actions. The time to act is now. Together, we can build a world where justice prevails for everyone, where no one is left behind, where everyone's rights are respected, and where a more equitable society is not just a dream, but a reality.